Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar from TriStar. My name is Thiagu Palaniappan. Today's topic is going to be the Creo top enhancements overview. The next hour, we'll see what are the key enhancements in Creo 8. Those who are not familiar with TriStar, we are a company that helps manufacturing companies adopt software systems and processes to allow better and more efficient product development. And we do this by being the largest worldwide resellers for PTC products. So we do Windchill implementation, training, consulting. We also have some custom solutions for engineer to order type processes. And we are headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona, and we have our team spread across the United States and Canada. From an agenda standpoint, for the next hour or so, I thought of going through some of the key enhancements, mainly on the core enhancement side initially, both from a usability standpoint and productivity standpoint, the core modeling, things like sheet metal assemblies, detailing in MBD, and also if time permits, we'll also get into some of the add-on extensions and tools such as simulation, generative design, additive manufacturing, cabling. So there's been a few enhancements in those areas as well, apart from the core areas that you currently use on a day-to-day basis. This is just a quick snapshot of pretty much all the areas that they enhanced. It might be one or two enhancements sometimes, but this just gives you an idea of the core modeling obviously has been improved. Multi-body design introduced in Creo 7. They're kind of working on that still with a few enhancements. As always, sheet metal design assemblies, MBD, and detailing has always been a key enhancement area in pretty much all the releases these days. Apart from that, some of the extensions, right? GD&T Advisor or generative design extension, or interactive surface design extension for advanced surfacing, all of including both subtractive and additive manufacturing areas have been improved. But since we have an hour, I'll try to do some of the key things. And as always, there is the Creo help file that you can always, go into PTC's Creo help, and they pretty much have all these areas that I just showed you in depth, with some examples. Some of the key things that I thought might be helpful is what I'm going to be covering today. Every year, as you know, starting Creo 6 and Creo 5, 6, you've seen almost every year, March, April comes springtime, you're going to be seeing Creo release, PTC release a new Creo release. And a couple of months before, right, exactly 2 months ago, April 14th is when Creo 8 was released. Some of you may be in Creo 7, some of you may be in Creo 4, or even some earlier releases. But after Creo 4, the next long release was Creo 7, and then Creo 8 was released a couple of months ago. And if you're on Windchill, if you're planning to still look at, if it's compatible, you can see that, Windchill 11.1, you have to be on 11.1 MO20, CPS 17, and 11.2, 11.2.1.7 in order for Creo 8 to work, right, for the compatibility standpoint. Now, first off, the dashboards, right? Let's cover usability first. The dashboard, as you know, from the old Pro Engineer days and the Wildfire, and now the Creo releases, used to be a dialog box, then came the dashboard, and that has evolved, and they've been continuing to improve that. Starting Creo 8.0, you will be seeing the certain important or primary panels open automatically for you, right? So unlike before, where you will have to manually click it, now for new users, when you're attempting to create a feature that you've not done in a while, it kind of helps you through that. At the same time, you can also detach and have multiple panels open simultaneously, and you have some settings. If you don't prefer the multiple panels, you probably still prefer your mini toolbar instead of the feature. That's fine too, but there are settings for it. So let's take a quick look at that. So what I have is Creo 8.0, and let me open up a file here. I'm going to go open up a very simple model. So when I start any feature moving forward, whether it's in advanced modules or whether it's in basic module, right now I'm in the, if I go out of the mode that I was in, I'm just in the regular part mode. And if I do, let's say, a whole feature, right, if I create a whole, it understands to open up that placement tab automatically. And since I have my model tree, it understands to kind of move over, right? It's a little more optimized. Before, it used to fall right on top of your model tree. That's pretty nice, I think. They kind of fixed that. And it gives you, so this is applicable for all features, right? If I do a little sweep feature, it gives you the dashboard, right? It opens up right away. The important ones, right? If I do an extrude, it understands that, okay, you need a sketch for it, right? Either define an internal sketch or select an external sketch. It has that in there. Even for features such as, you know, it's across the board. So let's say I go to welding here, right? For example, and I would like to create a fillet weld between these two surfaces. I'm using my mini toolbar to activate the weld. But as you can see, as soon as I initiated the weld, I'm in the fillet weld dashboard, right, with all the options. First of all, they have they have more labels and better, you know, it's much better than how it was in Creo 7. Overall, all dashboards, right? Here it opens up my primary panel automatically for me. So I know I can go to the site 2 and select the site 2. Gives me an immediate preview, as always, right? I'm going to specify a specific value here. Now, as I'm doing this, there are times in the past where it will only allow you to open one at a time, but now I'm able to go detach this, right? I can go to the options tab. For example, the panel, I'm just going to go move that over here. So maybe I'd like to see all at the same time, and that's new in Creo 8. So now that it looks like it's a surface weld, it's not closed, I could just go to solid weld right in here. I could just go to intermittent weld. Intermittent used to be an option in the dashboard. Now we have a separate panel with a lot more control options. And maybe I could just set it to, let's say I want to make it, set it a specific value for that and number of them. I can just use end with weld, so it kind of evenly space this out within those, right? How many do I want? 4 or 5 of them. It kind of gives me, you know, options in there. So I could, and it remembers these. So let's say I'm done with these. At this point, I get the nice little weld node, and this is one of the advantages of creating welds in 3D itself. But now if I go and create a new feature or redefine it or edit definition, it will remember those panel locations. I can always put it back, right? I have this little icon that it'll go back in there, right? And this is it's pretty nice. It works across the board, like I said, from basic features as well as to advanced features. And I see a benefit mainly for advanced features where you might want to access multiple panels at the same time. For example, in sheet metal design, you might want to have the panel open for adjusting the miter cut or the corner relief, as well as the references, the edge references, all at the same time. And it's a very good usability enhancement. And you can control those. If you don't prefer that, you could always go to File Options, and you can go to Windows Settings. And under Windows Settings, you have the option to not automatically open important panels. If you prefer the old way, you can just uncheck that, and these would save to your customization.ui file. You could always reset panels, so that the next time when I create the weld, all those 3 or 4 dashboards are not open, or you can leave it as is too. Okay. All right. So that, let's just go to back in here. So that's dashboards, and then datums have been improved. It has a much more modernized display finally. The coordinate system used to be an XYZ coordinate system, and it also used to be very tough selecting sometimes, right? You have to be on the name. Now they give you the RGB colors for the coordinate system, a lot better. That's Creo 8, this is Creo 7, and you can control those in your system colors options, right? Or you can have your own system color file to control that as well. And datum planes have a filled option now, and then you can control the transparency of that fill, right? Which is pretty nice, I think. And it has some smartness built in, so when you are in sketch mode, it automatically goes away, the fill goes away. Or if you switch to wireframe or hidden line style, it'll go away as well. And all this can be controlled. And there are a few config options that I've listed here that would help you. Maybe you want to just switch back to the old legacy type datum plane like it was in Creo 7. You could do it that way too, right? And also datum points itself, right? Those are also improved. So let's take a quick look at that. Actually, one more option in the datum planes is one option that I used to use during my industry days, where when I create a start part itself, I used to ensure that those 3 datum planes are quite small, right? I'll have to go redefine it, or create a small circle, because usually the first sketch you do will be like 500 by 500, some large value, because the size of the plane by default is set to like 500 and by 500 or some value depending on the unit system you use. Now there's a config option, pretty nice, Datum display default, that allows you to control how that by default how datum planes are sized. Does it have to be based on a reference? Does it have to be based on the model outline? Or do you just want it to control it with some default outline? So maybe I want my datum planes, whenever I create them, to always be by 10 units by 10 units or 20 by 20, right? So to reduce the clutter on the screen. Now, we could edit definition before and change it, but the default behavior can be changed now, right? So there's a couple of options on the datum plane side and the datums itself. So let's take a quick look at that also. So for example, I'm going to go into another one here. Let's see if I could open up another part. So I have a part in here, and I'm going to enable my datum planes. And the first thing that's new in Creo 8 is this plane fill display that's enabled in there, right? You can enable or disable them. So if I go to my 3 planes, I unhide them. Right now, the fill is not very apparent because I have the default transparency set right in there, right? But I can go into File, Options, and under Entity Display, if I go right now, the fill transparency is set to 7, right? You could enable them or disable them. Let's say I want to set it to close to some value there, right? And all this can be adjusted. I'm not going to save my config for it right now, but there it is, right? So you have, you can control that transparency. And by the way, if I go into sketch mode, right, I want to sketch on that plane, for example, it's smart enough to take away that remote display. You still have your good old clip modeler they introduced in Creo 4.0. So all that is there, so you can collect references easily, and it's easier to see rather than going to hidden line style, etc. Right? So let's so that's and it also removes that shaded fill display when you switch to no hidden style or hidden line style, any of these. When you switch to shading with edges or shading with reflections, it understands to keep that in there, right? So that's let me just hide those once again from the mini toolbar. And also, you know, as soon as I open the model, the first thing that catches my attention is these red X's in there, right? Those are datum points. So datum points are a lot more, you know, appearance is a little more better now compared to the old color that they used to have. You still can turn on your datum tags and, you know, turn on the point tags, etc. But I like how it's displayed now. And also when you create new planes, for example, let's say here I want to create a new datum plane. As always, right, by default, it still is like in Creo 7 and prior, where it will fill to the models, you know, the model outline. So in this case, why is it going a little bit farther? Maybe there might be, I do have an import feature, as you can see, and the import feature may have some surfaces or edges or curves that it's probably using, and it's probably hidden, and that's why you could see that it is essentially a little bit larger than I would have liked. Now, I could, like before, we still have the option display and say I want to control it, make it smaller, you know, just control to that reference size, or I could just say, maybe I want to manually adjust it or make it smaller or larger, right? Now, the question is, you know, could we control this by default? And we didn't have an option right before, and now you do have. So if I go to my configs, config option, and if I go to configuration, and there I'm able to go, you know, I can add datum display. And if I go into actually datum display right in there, and you can control the fill, or you can just say by default, would you prefer the outline or reference size or pre-configured size, right? The model outline is a default as in the earlier release, but I could go to pre-configured size. And when I set it to pre-configured size, what I could do is I could just also set up the outline. So for example, the width and the height, right? So I'm going to go and say my datum outline default width is going to be, I don't know, 15 maybe. For the height or the width is also going to be a 15, let's say. I've added those 3 things in my config, right? These are the 3 things I've added in there, right? I'm setting it to pre-configured size, so that moving forward, if I create a new plane, for example, maybe I want to create a new plane off of that point. I go create a plane off of that, and I'm just selecting those surfaces, so it's, you know, parallel to that and through that point. you see that how it knew to set, if I look at the value here, it is set to 15 by 15, right? That's the height and the width of that plane, right, by default. And of course, I could, if that point was a pattern point, I could obviously use my mini toolbar and pattern it, and it picks up the reference pattern as before. Nothing, the same as before, right? It still follows a pattern and everything. Now, when I do a redefine, I'm able to go to display and want to set it to, I don't know, maybe 20 by 20, for example, or make it a little bit larger on here, size, and then it updates, etc. Right? So similarly, I can go to that file options, and I'm even able to ensure if I go to my config editor here and look at what's loaded in my current session, I could say instead of the pre-configured size, I would like you to use a reference size. So that's pretty nice. I really like that, where whatever reference you pick first to create the plane, it will use that to control the size of the plane automatically for you. So those are a couple of nice options I thought that we have starting Creo 8.0. Another thing is on the coordinate system, right? So if I turn on my coordinate system, there is my coordinate system. You have the XYZ RGB color. It's a lot more easier to select. Before you got to hover over the actual name. It's sometimes difficult to select, but now, allows you to select anywhere on that, and it picks it up, right? You're selecting the coordinate system there. So points, datum points, coordinate systems, and your datum planes itself are improved. You still have your color options, for better display. You can always go to your system appearance, and under datum, you do have the option to control the RGB color axis. You can control that as well, right? Okay. Let's look at the next few options here. The visibility control and selection. Also, there are some minor enhancements there. When you select items, you could select all solids just like before, but you also have the ability to select a quilt or a body, as you can see here, right? So you have a couple of options in your mini toolbar. Select the quilt or body. In the past, it used to be you had to go to the selection filter or keep right-clicking to query select. Better options for select from parents, where quilts are also listed now, especially if you do a lot of surfacing. It's very useful, I think. And also, I like this make transparent option. You can select any geometry from any component, and right in the mini toolbar, you're able to make it transparent without having to go to component display, make this transparent, or without having to control your appearances. You still have those, but pretty quick and easy. And if you have solid bodies that they introduced in Creo 7.0 or quilts or even tessellated geometry, maybe an STL file, or you may have some geometry created using freestyle, or maybe using our generative design process. In that case, you're able to differentiate those, and you can control the transparency individually, globally throughout that model, right? So that's pretty useful. So here's an example where I have an assembly, and I can select specific parts, make them transparent. A little more easier workflow, I think, compared to how you used to do it before. You still have that, but and also on Sketcher, you have a much more improved visibility in the Sketcher side, where the dimension background will adjust depending on what you're doing, right? If you drag the dimensions, if you move the dimensions, it has a different color depending on the background side. If it's in a dark background, it gives you this light color. If it's in if you move this away, it gives you a different color, or get rid of that background. So it's a little more smart overall. Appearance-wise, they have worked on it quite a bit, right? That's one thing there. So let me just quickly show you that example. Let me just open up a model here. So I have an assembly that I've opened, and I do have some quilts, solid bodies, and I have some tessellated geometry, like this geometry that they're right in here. The first thing is if I select any component's geometry, I have this little make transparent option, wherein you're essentially making that body or component transparent really quickly, right? And you can control that transparency too. So I have this filter. Creo 7 had this filter mainly for BREP geometry and non-BREP geometry, but now they have improved upon that as a second step, where you got 3 options: solid bodies, quilts, and tessellated, wherein you're essentially able to go and control all the solid bodies that had transparency set this way. You're able to go and control the transparency. Same thing can be done with the quilts. I do have this, maybe to create my sheet metal design, I probably have created some surface geometry, and then I might create an offset, what have you. But right in here, I'm going to go and I can control, there it is, right? I'm able to control the transparency of surfaces, all quilts in my entire design, assembly or part. It should change the transparency. Similarly with my tessellated geometry right in here, as I'm dragging it, you can see that I'm kind of controlling. If I go back up here, and it's essentially controlling this part in here. So you still have your good old select. You can just select the component using the Alt key, go back to model display, and you can go transparent that we used to do before. But when I do that and then I go change the transparency, as you can see, it's not changing the transparency of this part because that is not assigned using the new body transparent option. So just a few things in there, right? You can still go to your view manager and you can save this, whatever you applied here as a style, as a style rep, right? And I can, if I double click on the master rep, I'll get rid of that. So it's a few things on the just on the appearances and visibility side here. And one more thing on the sketcher also, the enhancement is pretty nice, where if I go edit any of the dimensions, right, any of the features that have sketch-based dimensions or dimensions in general, you could see how it's a little more, I think, a lot more clear, I think, compared to before with the background colors. And as I rotate the model, the 60 dimension now has a background color compared to when it was here, right? And it's a little more, we can control that, right? There are options. The background option itself wasn't introduced in Creo 6, but it's pretty nice. Even if you do a little edit definition on that feature, for example, and let's say you are in the middle of a sketch, right? You want to get into the sketch. As you can see, it opened up the dashboard. Even while sketching, as I'm dragging it, that background color goes away. It has a different, it's a lot more better when I'm dragging it, when I'm moving it. And I can see what is my floating point a lot more clearly compared to the old options. The arrows a little more better. I think overall it's improved, right? The visibility and the appearance itself. Okay, so getting back to the presentation here. One of the big ones that I personally like on the fundamentals and the part modeling side is this concept of design tree. So the model tree has been enhanced now, wherein it can list this design items. Design items could be your annotations, your materials. It could even be custom folders that you might want to use from an organization standpoint, regardless of the feature regeneration order. It could have bodies that they introduced in Creo 7. It could have quilts. So I can essentially have your regular model tree with your feature order, etc. But then I could also have my design tree, and I'm able to look at the split tree. And when I select any geometry, it should highlight in both places. And this, I'm using it more for organizing it, right? I like to organize those items regardless of the order in which they're done. So pretty big enhancement. And you can control, what type of body or quilts can it display? Should it display consumed? And quilts and bodies, if they are consumed during a Boolean operation, they're gone, but still I'd like to see them. Maybe I'd like to go back in time and see a snapshot of that, how it was, right? I don't have to go back like your insert mode like we used to do before and spend some time on the regeneration speed there. I'm able to go select those quilts or bodies, and I'm able to go and even create a snapshot of those. So that's the reason why I'm enabling these consumed quilts and bodies. I'll show you in a minute here, but this is kind of how your design items tree is going to look like. You have your quilts, you have your bodies, you also have your folders, custom folders that you can create, and typically they would contain these, right? They're going to be containing your materials, your annotation elements, your annotation features essentially, right? Your bodies, your quilts, including folders that you can organize them for. So very, very flexible and very useful. Here's an example of the custom group here. I've added some groups and I've included my bodies and quilts into those custom groups. You can even create a group kind of like you would do with layer and activate a layer. You could create a custom group, activate that, or set that as a default group. So moving forward, any quilts or bodies you create will be automatically associated to that folder, right? So pretty powerful there. And like I said, it's the best thing is it allows the side-by-side comparison Very, very useful. And one really cool feature that I like, especially if you do a lot of surfacing, is if you were to go and interrogate a design, or somebody else, your coworker, work on a surface model to create this lamp design, most of the time you'll have to go back and see how it was done or to make changes. And so to get an idea of the design intent, but starting with Creo 8, I really like how you're able to use snapshots, right? So you can just select that quilt or body and say show snapshot. You can also create a keyboard shortcut if you'd like for it, but then without reverting to the insert mode, at any point of time, it will show you the snapshot of how it looked at that point of time. So pretty nice. And you can also create a copy. So essentially it's creating a duplicate of that, which you can make use. Very, very powerful, I think. And let me quickly show you some of these. And this big one, this is a huge one, I think, in the part modeling side that I personally like. Been playing with it on surface models, and I really liked it. So here you go. Let me get out of my datum planes and everything. So here I have a model, and typically what would happen is in a model like this, you see you have a lot of merge, surface sweeps, things like that. And most of the time you just go into at some point of time, before all this, right? If I go drag up or something like that, right? As you can see, you always have to drag the insert indicator to see how it was done, etc. And you no longer have to do that, right? Let me exit from that insert mode. Instead of doing it that way, what I'm going to be showing you is why this design items in combination with the ability to use snapshots and copy snapshots are going to be really, really useful here. So let's say I want to go into my model tree, right? I'm sorry, the settings for it. I have the ability to quickly show layer tree now, just like that right in here. I can just drag it out, right up there. You no longer have to set up that, the old school enable model tree independent config option to float it around. So it's a lot more easier to do that. And I can just put it back on, or I could just say, no, I don't need the layer tree. I just need the model tree, right? And in the model tree, the very first item you notice is the design items now, and that has quilts, bodies, lamp, folders, right in there. So now I could just go and say, let's show that design tree in a separate one. So I have a parallel split tree here, right, between two trees in here. And if I go quilts, bodies, and the lamp right there, you see that how I have created for my design to better organize it. I'm going to make use of these folder structure, and I can create them any point. I can create new ones at any point of time, right? But before I do that, if I select any geometry, it's really nice how it kind of expands the folder in which it exists, right? That's under the split, that's a copy, and it also shows you in your regular tree, so pretty nice. So if I select my parting surface geometry here, it again highlights both at the same time, so pretty powerful there, right? Same thing with any of these geometry, right? I click on these geometry, or I select this button geometry, for example. Okay, that's under the body. There's a body for the button, and it belongs there. It also belongs here. Very nice. And the advantage of these is what I can do now is I'm able to go, okay, it's for the button itself, right? There's like two, there's a consumed body and a body that's not consumed. And I'm probably going to go drag them, drop them right into my button folder. So regardless of the feature order, I'm kind of organizing it essentially here, right? Same way if I go into my, so I click on this driving top, there's a lot of driving surfaces, but I have no idea what it looks like, right? It's already done in surfacing, but really nicely, I can right mouse click and say show snapshot. So when I do that snapshot, it's showing without me going to insert mode at that point of time how it looked like, right? And I can do this on each one of them. I can right click, show snapshot. I can even make a copy of it. Or better still, right, rather than doing it every time using the right mouse click, I know in Creo 4.0, many of you know PTC introduces keyboard shortcuts, much better than the good old map keys. We still have the good old map keys where you have to record, but keyboard shortcuts are really awesome in my view, where you can always select with assigned shortcuts and without assigned shortcuts, a lot of shortcuts, predefined shortcuts out of the box. At the same time, you can also assign your own. So here I'm going to go select on the commands that have not been assigned shortcuts. And here I'm going to search for example, I might search for the snapshot. And I'm going to assign for show snapshot. I might want to assign, there it is, right? Show snapshot. And I'm going to say, okay, let's say S or something, but whoops, that's a problem. You know, it's smart enough to know that, okay, S is already assigned to sketch, and you have to, you say you want to override it or no, I'm going to say no, and maybe I'll just use something else, maybe Z, I guess. Okay, and that's it. So now that I have a snapshot for it, I should be able to just select any of these and then go Z, and you know, as you can see, I'm selecting. I clearly understand kind of how it was done. In fact, if I click outside or refresh it, it's gone, but it's still helpful, I think, right? In fact, I could even go to some of these individual features and do the Z, right? As you can see, okay, they did a revolve, looks like, and then they did an extend, right? And I can keep looking at this, right? I'm just hitting the Z each time as I'm doing this, right? Get to the other side in here. So there it goes, right? And then looks like they created the round, a couple of rounds in there. So even for the merge, you know, before, imagine, you know, this merge could be within a group or in a pattern or what have you. I'll have to go, you know, insert mode, spending a lot of time, and I really like, this is huge, right? To capture, to better look at how it was done, not only for that, and also when you want to do replace and things like that, it's a lot easier, I think. So now that I know these are all used for driving, maybe I'm just going to go select these geometries, and then I'm going to go put it in my driving surface folder, right? I have this driving surfaces folder, custom folder. I have in them now, right? Same thing, I can also create my own, right? For example, I could go into this housing and say, let's create my own little custom group in here, right? And that I'm going to call it as the grooves on the top right there, right? That you see, right? These three, right? These grooves. So again, if I do have a pattern here, so again, I'm going to look at the snapshot. There it is, right? There's a snapshot. I can also create a copy of that, right? Snapshot. So same thing, I'm going to go say, let's create a snapshot of this. So I know, okay, so these should be inside my grooves folder there, right in there. So that's under grooves. So like this, you know, as you can see here, I have this glass, you know, what is that? What exactly is that? So I'm going to go do my Z, and okay, that is used for creating these. I'm able to go organize them, better organize them. I'm going to say, okay, that should go into this, into right in here, right? And you can, you know, drag and drop them. The nice thing is it's regardless of in what order they're done. Very, very nice way to organize your designs, especially complex geometry designs. Very, very useful, I think. Okay, so let me just get out of this one here. So that's and then they also, you know, just keeping on that same model that I showed you, the snapshot is useful, but then when you replace, you know, we've had the old reroute for a long time where you can replace one plane with another plane or one surface with another surface, and then all the children update. But now there is a really nice option where it will allow you to, when you do a replace, it'll allow you to recursively list this little icon right here, all the children, the grandchildren, if you will, like, you know, you have a parent-child relationship in Creo, depending on how you designed it. But especially in surface models like this, I don't want you to just show me the immediate children, right? The child features. I would like you to show you even the successive ones, or the children, great grandchildren, you know, and so on. In a large model, you may end up creating so many relationships. It allows you to go and automatically replace that. You could replace it. It automatically does a regenerate and switches to the next one. So this is also a pretty nice one. Let me take a quick minute here to kind of show you that that option here, for it to go into a different model. So this is for a similar model. I just had some patterns done, in fact, to help with some regeneration time. I'm going to go before these buttons in here. Okay, so what I have here, going back to my design tree, if I look at my design items, and I have my quilts and everything here. So there's my the driving back one there, right? Let me do a Z on that. So that's showing the snapshot. It looks like that's a surface that it's currently using to build that back geometry. But I do have an alternate driving back option here, which I'm going to unhide. And I'm going to go back to this and say show. So let's say I would like to replace the red surface with the blue surface, right? That's kind of what my alternate option is. And back in the old days, it still was there. It was the old reroute, and then edit references was really improved in Creo 3.0, if you remember. But this replace reference is not new, right? This itself, I'm sure, if you're not using it, you should be using it. It's very powerful, where I can replace using a dialog box where it kind of shows me what I'm going to replace, and what are the child features that will get impacted by this replace. Now that's only one step, but now we can go multiple steps down the line. So here I'm getting, there it is, right? What are the children, the merge, and then the quill that I'm replacing, right? But this is the new one right up here. There's an icon here for recursive listing. So right now I'm going to say, yeah, instead of that, I'd like to probably go with this guy here, right? The blue one. And it's doing its, it looks like it is doing its thing here. I'm going to go preview. Looks like the merge has updated. There it is, right? It did merge, so now it has a different edge. But before in Creo 7, this is how far you can go and go to click OK and deal with the failures after that. But now I'm able to go and click on this guy really quickly. And at this point of time, it's listing all the children, the grandchildren, etc. Right? So quite a lot of features in there. And it's highlighting, you know, in Creo 3 itself, they introduced missing references where are showing up, right? And starting Creo 3, that is a huge update. So instead of that, I would like you to use this, obviously, right? I just replaced one edge and watch what happens to the dialog box with the original references. It's recursively going through, hitting regenerate on each one of them. If it finds an issue, maybe I'll have to still keep replacing and so on, but I was able to replace it to that other geometry now. I'm just gonna go okay out of this. I have a few other quills that are for the buttons and they're suppressed, that's why it's not highlighting there. But so my point is, this replace recursively is very powerful. You know, that it is, right? It can so the snapshots, the design tree is a big enhancement in my view, along with edit references in the part modeling side, right? So let me get back to a few other things that I wanted to quickly talk about. So pretty nice enhancements there. Again, sticking on with still on surfacing, when you do trim, offset, or curve, trim, etc., or merge, that editing group used to be sometimes object action versus action object, where you have to select an item, only then the extent will show up, for example, or the trim will show up, you know. So now they allow both workflows, action object and option object action workflow. And within the same feature, they consolidated, for example, you could start with the trim, and then depending on what you pick, right, or do you want to trim the quilt or the curve, they kind of consolidated that. So it allows for your object action versus action object workflow. Both workflows are supported now. I personally prefer object action. I believe that's faster, where you select on a geometry and then the system tells you what to do. But some of you might still prefer, some of you might be new to surfacing and you know what command to use when. That's very powerful there too, right? And then there's a geodesic curve on surface, very, very useful, especially when you want to create curves through 2 points, where you want to get the shortest path, kind of like in a sphere or like in Earth, you know, it's in the globe, you know, if you select 2 points and you want to get to the shortest path, we call it the geodesic curve, right? So Creo now has, in your curve through points, it has a geodesic curve option. For example, I might have a robot here and it's a shop floor, what have you, and I'd like to know the shortest path. I can do point to point, and then as I'm dragging this point or moving this point, it will update in real time. So what is the shortest path? You know, it kind of goes around it once I select the surface through which it has to go through. So another nice little option, I think. If I go into, let me just take a quick minute here to show you that. So I have this curve done. Maybe I'm going to go just get rid of that guy, right? The existing one. Let me just go delete this existing curve. But if I have my datum points on, so there it is. You still have your datum curve through points as before. But when I go point to a point, it gives you a straight line like before. And as before, I could go see place on surface, and I can select surfaces, or I could just select the entire body, right? So this is kind of what happens, right? It's almost like projecting it. Now, what I could do is I could turn on this geodesic curve option. So when I turn that on, it's essentially saying, okay, do you want to go through this way or do you want to go through this way, right? A couple of options now, right? So that's the shortest path it found out. Now, the nice thing about this is if I were to edit this point, let's say just to make sure I have the regenerate set to auto regen, so that should update as I'm making the change in real time. I'm just going to go drag this point, and as you can see, as soon as I drag this point to the other side, it's picking up this as the shortest path, right? And I can, of course, you know, drag it becomes a straight line and what have you, right? So, and the same thing works with the other example I was showing you, where I could have had some sweeps done through that. So, you know, this is a good first step. Maybe there could be used for routing. It could be, there are a lot of use cases I'm thinking for this. It's a good first step by PTC. on the geodesic curve option for point-to-point curves, right? And then the holes, right? Holes have really been improved in Creo 8. They finally have the most requested sketched hole function. So when I say sketched hole, more for placement, where you're able to do multi-holes in one feature, which was not possible before. We always had to do a pattern or copy to duplicate holes. And now I'm able to essentially create a sketch, and I can have it use either datum points in the sketch or the vertices or even the midpoints. You have those options, right? You can use any of those and it quickly places them. It'll also work as a pattern, so reference pattern is supported on them. They also improved tapped and tapered holes. Tapered hole itself has been there from Wildfire 4.0, nothing new. However, you have the straight drill option now, right? The tapered hole was there, but then now you have the straight drill option. And during my industry days, some of these I had to use UDFs, user-defined features, and now it is a lot more easier where you have the option to control the straight drill. You want to give it a different depth? What about the diameter, right? The angle, all those options are available, as you can see here, right? So a lot more options for when you create these type of, tapered hole threaded holes in there. A little more options in here. When you do the thread, you can control the through thread. Is it going to go up to surface, drill up to the next surface? A lot more smart than it used to be in Creo 7 or 8, especially when you're saying that the hole itself goes through up to the selected surface where you want the thread to be stopping here, or do you want to control that? You can control that through thread depth depending on what options you've selected here. So a few hole options. And there was an old lightweight hole introduced in the Wildfire days where I used to use this whenever I had large patterns with several number of holes. I would set that hole to lightweight hole, wherein it'll just show the graphics, but it's not removing material. And for the 2D drawing, it might be okay, right? For manufacturing the whole table and to make the whole, that's all they care about. It's good, but I know the caveat being it affects your mass properties, and the mass properties it's more heavier than it has to be because you're not removing the material. So it's a good way for helping with large assembly performance where you may have a part with several hole patterns. It used to be supported for certain hole types, but now all hole types, including standard holes, all of them can be made lightweight, either using the model tree or in the dashboard, right? So there's a couple of nice options there. The whole notes have been improved. The callouts, they have new tokens for them, especially when you have patterned or non-patterned hole. It used to be that in Creo 7, sometimes if you have one hole, it'll show the number of hole is 1, but now it doesn't highlight that unless it's a pattern or unless it's a multi-hole. Even the dashboard has been improved. I think it's the verbose here is a lot better, right? These are to control the profile. This is for countersink or counterboard. This control the size, a little more well laid out, I think. So let me do a quick demo on the hole itself. For example, I have this this model here, and typically when you create a hole, you would use a coaxial hole, linear hole, diameter hole, etc. But now I'm able to select a sketch like this and drill a hole where it automatically by default, as you can see, it opens up the placement by default, the new dashboard enhancement, and there is a sketched hole now, right? So this is new, right? I'm not talking about the sketched hole up here that has been there for a long time. This is more to control like a custom profile or something, right? Instead of doing a revolve cut, that's what you'd use this one for. This more for the type of the hole itself. And I can click on this icon right here, and in my right mouse click, I can say, should I be using endpoints, or should I be using maybe, I don't want midpoints, maybe I want only midpoints to be used, right, to locate the hole, or maybe I want to use the endpoints but not the midpoints and things like that. I can do it here. And this also applies to standard holes and things like that, right? So pretty easy to do it, right? So imagine sketching if I had a quick, let's say I'll just do a basic part from scratch in here. And if I were to go to the plane, one of the planes in here, and say I want to go start with a center rectangle here real quick. And if I would like to have a hole that's, I might have it rounded and things like that. But the advantage now is I'm able to create for example, I could go into hole command, right? I start with a hole, and in your, in Creo 6, they introduced this mini toolbar inside the hole itself, I'm able to go and select the sketched hole right up here. That's new, right? I could go say sketched hole is new right there, and it puts me in a sketch environment. I could probably do a little, maybe in this case, I'll probably do an offset. So the design intent, would be offset from this geometry. So I'm going to just loop this guy the outside, and let's give it some value there, right? I will just, we'll give it just go change, select that. If I could get that dimension really quickly, it's just yeah, I'm still in the offset mode. That's why it didn't work in there. So there it is, right? Let's make it some value inside, and even maybe some value out there. So having done that, I'm able to go now into my whole command, and it understands right now, right? So let's say I'm going to type in like so larger value here. We'll just give it a bigger value. So you see how I'm able to go say create point, in between, right? All those are midpoints or only endpoints. It's a lot easier. So it updates. It'll also have a little icon next to it showing it's a multi-hole. So very easy to see that right up there. So some nice, really nice enhancements on the whole feature that you should explore a little bit if you're using Creo 8. And then some usability enhancement on the assembly side. When you have data sharing features, from any data sharing feature, you should be able to open a reference model from the right click, whether it's a shrink wrap or a copy jump, all those, you should be able to right click and open a reference model, kind of like you used to do with sheet metal form features, right? The published geometry can be pushed to the footer now, more helping with regeneration. It's typically done after regeneration, so it makes sense to use published geometry in the footer. And if you use flexibility or varied items and inheritance features, it will, if this is a flexibility one, it will highlight how many dimensions you used, right? How many features, it gives you the number there. And also basic constraints, right? Before it'll just say, constraints invalid, or it gives you a color-based one, including telling, fully constrained using assumptions, right? The little warning. So a lot more feedback, I'm thinking. But one of the biggest ones in assembly in general is the inseparable assembly, right? Inseparable assembly, where I really like it, where during my industry days, I used to have these purchase components where I really don't need to see the files or the parts inside of those purchase components in my bill of material. I also no need to have them unnecessarily. Some of these, motors and things like that you have not designed, you have it in your windshield workspace with all those files, right? And also in your bill of material, you don't need to see them. Now you're able to embed them, or you can make them inseparable. So for example, I'm able to select this entire engine, right, that you see here, right? It's part of another assembly. This engine is something that I'm not designing, and that's a supplier component, that's a purchase component. I'd like to obviously show that one component in my BOM, but I don't need to see everything inside of it in my BOM. What I could do is I could just embed them now, right? So very useful. I can convert, or I could create a new one. There's several options here. You can also go the other way around. You can extract them. It essentially creates copies. So here's a simple example, right? I have an assembly, subassembly with two parts. This subassembly right here, I'm able to make it inseparable, and you can see these icons tell me that if I save this entire assembly right now, I'm not going to see in my folder these two parts. They are embedded into this, right? So all I'm going to see is it's these two. So all I'm going to see is the A1 assembly there. Now, if I want, I can extract them, right? I can always go and say make them separable if I would like, and then the files in your disk will be the same thing. Happens with Windchill, right? Windchill is not going to look at these individual embedded components for your BOM, right? For your WT part structure, you're going to just see this, and that's exactly what we want, right? We don't have to go back and manipulate that individually. Now you're able to go select parts or entire subassembly and say make it separable, and this one takes ownership, right? Now when you extract it, you got to be careful. You're essentially creating copies, right? Even when you do this one, right, it's creating a copy. This is like creating a copy there. So got to be a little bit, got to think about referencing and drawings. But it's the bottom line here is really when you have purchased items, you should be managing one business object, right? And that's really what we're doing here. So I have an assembly where this plug assembly, you can see that it has subassembly has quite a lot of components in here, and they're all embedded right now, So again, by default, it's turned off. You got to enable this config option, inseparable assembly operations, and then you'll be able to make it inseparable. And this works even on imported components, right, during import. So maybe I imported this from SolidWorks or some other CAD system, and let's say it was a virtual, I believe SolidWorks has it as a virtual assembly. So it's able to identify that, and it will embed it inside of Creo, right? So some pretty nice options, I think. Let me just take, I know we're about to wrap up here. Let me just take a quick minute to kind of show you that embedded assembly option. So if I go into an assembly, and it's very, very useful, I think, especially when you have purchased items. So let me go into an assembly that I'm looking for is maybe this tower assembly. There it goes. So what you see on here is a top-level assembly, the socket, tower top-level assembly, and I do have these two sub-assemblies there that are purchased, and we don't design it. Obviously, we'd like to have it and show it, things like that, right? That's the one. So I don't need to have these components and everything in here. So by default, if I go to operations, you have inseparable assemblies that is going to be grayed out, but that's where you got to go to your config options, and under config options, if you do just search for inseparable, right, you'll see enable inseparable options, and you enable that. By default, it's turned off. And once you turn that on, I'm able to go and pretty much select, I don't know, I'm going to just select a component in one of these right in here. I'm able to select any component here, and I could just embed them. So what is it doing when I hit embed? It's going to give you some warnings about, you got to learn about how references are handled, things like that. I can go to advanced. If I pick the assembly, just to select which parts I want to embed, which parts I don't want to embed. But when I click OK out of that, you see how currently it's almost like it has made a copy and it's embedded. So nowhere this will show up, right, in your workspace, or if I were to do a backup of it, right, say that this won't be there, right? I could do it this way, or I could select the entire assembly, and I could say, let's go to inseparable assembly, and I want to make this inseparable. So right now, I can go to advanced tab in here, and it allows me to select, okay, what do you want to embed and what you don't want to embed, right? I have two occurrences of this assembly, so I'm embedding that, as you can see, right? And once I embed that, now in my bill of materials, there is an option to also show the inseparable ones, but by default, it doesn't show them. So there it is, right? So you can see how it kind of shows them as an inseparable assembly right there. And I can do other things. I can go edit, I can open, I can do anything with it, right? But if I go to my BOM, right, the bill of materials right there, you do have the option to say, okay, show me the embedded components or not. If I show embedded components, then it'll show those embedded components as well, right? So there it is, right? Okay. So you could also, going back into your assembly mode, I could also create from scratch, maybe in the concepting stage. I just want to have one numbering scheme from Windchill. I want to create a new assembly that's embedded, and then I'm just still maybe I'm not yet ready to extract it, right? So it could be another use case there. Apart from purchase components, you could be using it for that as well, right? I could always extract them back, and I can always select this assembly, right-click it, go inseparable assembly, and I could say make them separable. And when I do that, it's kind of warning me that hey, it's going to create copies of it. All right, so let's say I'm going to make it extracted, generate few new file names. It's essentially creating, as you can see, for all of them, it put an _e with my file naming here, and I've gone the other way around. So now that I want it to be, it's working on it at this point. And while it's doing that, let me just get back to the rest of the presentation here. Sheet metal design also has some nice improvements, similar to the flange wall, which can go across curved geometry and multiple edges. Flat wall can go through straight edges, but multiple straight edges, right? And it has some built-in intelligence, depending on if it's going to be a convex or concave type corner. It can control the seam handling a little more intelligently now, right? It has miter support, many of the options we had before, but it's nice that you're able to do all this in one go instead of doing a copy paste or having to do it one at a time, right? Before. And also better options. You got about, 7 options here. When you have this 3 bend corner right here, do you want to have it as tangent, or do you want to have it as minimum corner opening, or would you prefer a ripped corner instead, right? Maybe something like this. We've had customers that will request us to close it out, just kind of maybe mimic the weld sometimes. So I had a recent customer that had inquired about this, so it's nice that Creo 8 has that option. And sometimes your hems, your flange walls used to fail on a corner like this, especially when you have specific type of reliefs, and they've fixed that. And the multi-hole option that I showed you in part modeling is applicable to sheet metal as well, right? I have one sketch and I got those holes punched, right? And if you use flexible or FMX editing, as you know, in Creo 4.0 and later, FMX in sheet metal is supported, where you're able to select items and it'll highlight geometry now for the design objects a little bit better. Even there are some enhancements in Welds and a lot more in here, mainly the user interface and some new dimensioning schemes for ISO style, Z1, Z2, etc. And then you also have these semantic query, where just like your, for MBD, all of you know how semantic queries are very important for downstream, where you may want to export it to an inspection software or maybe to a manufacturing software, and you have those semantic references for the PMI. But now for Weld also, you're able to go and say, show me the semantic references, and it picks up the regular actual geometry used to create that weld itself, right? So a few other usability enhancements overall, intermittency, I already showed you that. It's a separate panel, right? Much more better pictures, I would say, a lot more easier to understand for new users. If you had a staggered weld, for example, it'll highlight that in here, for example. Okay. And in the 2D drawing, the biggest enhancement is the symbols. Before I actually show you 2D drawing, really quickly getting back here. So here, going back to where I was, you can see how I've converted it back now, right? And it is a new part. It's a _E, right? When I extract it, it's creating copies again. So you got to be a little bit careful about referencing and the 2D drawing when you do this, but it's a better way to manage purchase components mainly. On the sheet metal side, if I were to go and quickly show you one example on how quickly you're able to add these additional walls. If I go and create a flat wall, there it is, right? I created a flat wall. Now I'm able to hold Control key and select additional ones. Before you couldn't do that with flat wall, right? For example, I might want to select a couple more edges here real quick, and it's also able to understand, what type of the seam it should give you by default, depending on the corner, right? And not only that, it's going to update all of them at the same time, right? I can change the angle together, for example. It all works together, right, just like before. So, or maybe we'll just leave it at 90 here. So that's one option. We're able to select multiple edges for flat walls. Not only that, you can also, just like before, you can add your own custom ones. For example, I want to add a flat wall here, and I also selected here, right, for example, but I'm able to go to your shape and sketch it. So for example, maybe I want to just throw in a couple of fillets in here in my sketcher. So I've changed that. I've customized that shape up there, and now maybe I want to make them equal as well, for example. And when I do that, it's going to warn me that, in order to apply this on multiple walls, you have to convert it to a 2D profile. Let's say yes, and it updates it. You can always, or manually do a convert here. You can even save this as a profile. So moving forward, you can use it for other ones. So for example, if I want to have a little flat wall here, right? I would like to use it on this edge and maybe this edge, but I'm going to go into shape and I could open predefined shapes, right? This is nothing new. It was there before also, right? I could go to, for example, the section 4, right? I had a notch in there already predefined in my sketch. There it is, right? So it's nice that how you're able to apply that really quickly, or even let's see here, maybe you want to go do a flat wall on this edge, this guy here, and this guy, but this time I want to go and use my sketch as one of those 2D sketches here, maybe something like this, and this is something, again, you could have just predefined one, save it as, or convert it to a 2D, and I'm able to go use, again, my Creo 6, everything is in your mini toolbar, where you could just, from the edge instead of the rip, I want to start the bend from the edge or along the edge right in there, right? So yeah, overall, it's some nice improvements, I think, on the 3D side. And on detailing and MBD, maybe I know it's about time here, so just a few things I want to quickly talk through, then we'll wrap up. The symbols themselves have been modernized compared to before. They have a gallery now. You can repeat symbols quickly. You can quickly pin them, commonly used ones, unlike before. So it's more of a ribbon UI for symbols instead of the old ones. So a lot more, I mean, the usability is improved, I would say. And even placement, right? You can quickly right-click, place it on entity, or use other options. You're also able to use customizations where they have a symbol customization command right after you place it or before placing it. You're able to go and change those variable text attributes right in here. Overall, some of the customers requested as an enhancement request to have the last symbol used to be attached. So it should be attached to the cursor automatically, and there's a config option for it. Some of you may prefer it, some of you may not prefer it. So it helps for whatever I use last, remember it in my drawing, and I want to read. So when I go to symbol, it'll just automatically pop up in your mouse cursor. So pretty nice options there. And there's a repeat command. I really like this one here, right? When you go repeat command like you have in assembly, once you have a symbol that's already a symbol, you simply select it and hit repeat, right? I know before you had to do copy paste. There's a couple of workarounds, but the repeat is pretty powerful, I think. And even simple flip options, it understands depending on how you drag it. And I really like the transform option in the mini toolbar now. Any symbol you place, you're able to hit transform. You can scale it, all right? You can rotate it by 90, etc. You can use a shift key to snap to specific angles. Pretty powerful there. And if there's in your admin changed the symbol and you want to update, you're able to update all the symbols in the drawing really quickly by doing a right click and update symbol. Same thing with symbol palette, right? It's a lot easier to place items in your symbol palette now compared to before, right? I could simply use add. Maybe I like a custom symbol I created, I can add to the palette if, of course, if your admin allows you to do that. Again, you have config options that would restrict somebody from editing the symbol palette or the DRW file for the symbol palette, right? And overall, symbols have been improved in the sense that they also have semantic references for MBD, very, very useful. I can add additional references. I can click on it and say, show me what are my semantic references, right? Long story short is the symbols are much improved in Creo 8.0, okay? And the drawing mode, some of the other enhancements is if you had your repeat region, you have the ability to include the embedded ones or not include the embedded ones, right? Would you like to show this assembly as one single item, or would you also like it to show the embedded components instead of that, right? Those are options available. And if you have some legacy AutoCAD or 2D legacy drawings without a 3D model, you may be using still the old sketching tools instead of the drawing mode. That has been improved now, right? If you're doing a lot of drafting in Creo drawing mode, then they have a lot more modernized UI, a lot more options to create sketches, especially with creating construction geometry, how quickly you can do it, and snap guides, dimension control, a lot more options if you were to edit a quick, legacy DRW where for which you don't have a 3D model. Okay, so some options there. A couple of ones on the data exchange here, where if you were to import a SolidWorks file or an NX file, you have the option to import inseparable assemblies. So if there are any virtual assemblies in them, it's able to identify from the source model and it's able to embed them automatically here. Same with exporting welds to step AP242 files or JT files. It's able to also export the PMI, right? You have an option to share the rich content, wherein your weld geometry as well as your annotations or PMI will also be exported, right? So pretty powerful there. And some few other miscellaneous enhancements here. If you do surfacing or ISDX, The dashboard, overall, the dashboard has been improved, a lot more. They really worked on the dashboards in Creo 8. You can see that, right? Both on the Warp tool as well as the ISDX surface tool. A little more easier to understand, okay, these are the settings. This is what is going to adjust, things like that. A little more, the labels are better, I think. A lot more easier for new users as well as for experienced users. There used to be an issue when Freestyle used to create geometry for generative design, where it used to use the actual polygon vertices to create that final surface, and that's been improved, a wee bit improved now. So you're going to get better control on those Freestyle geometry alignment, when you do the align command, right, where you can align it to a curve or an existing geometry. It's going to behave a lot more better. Rendering uses, as you know, starting Creo 4, the rendering in Creo is powered by Keyshot. So starting Creo 8, it can use Keyshot 9.3 rendering engine. So it can also leverage GPU. So if you have GPU, like a graphics card, like if you have the NVIDIA RTX graphics card, it knows to pick up the GPU. You can also do there's a hardware check utility where you can check if it's compatible for Render Studio or not, right? And a few other things, if you do have generative design that you might have bought in Creo 7, then in the past we had to create the automatic envelope, the solution space for it to do the optimization, but now you're able to select the system automatically picks it based on the preserved geometry and what you've given. It knows to create an envelope for you and then do the optimization using Freestyle as before, right? You also have a new option called minimum crease radius that might help with creating a better final geometry and options for parting line, wherein the system automatically creates those 2D or 3D parting line. So a little more fine tuning, I would say, in generative design if you have that. And moving on to Creo Simulation Live, if you currently use Creo Simulation Live Plus license, if you use Fluids, it used to be that the Fluids always used to be a transient analysis, and now steady state Fluids is the default. So a little more quicker, right? You can still have the option to switch it back to transient as a function of time, right? So a couple of enhancements on the ANSYS solutions there. On cabling, two new things. If you use the Pro cabling for routing and your harnesses and flattening, branch tape feature, it's essentially representing an electrical tape wrapped around wires and junctions. So you're able to select a point here, right? One of the actual points that you use to route, and then you can. It's considered as a feature, right? As a cosmetic feature, I should say, but it does require a spool, though, right? Just like the other cable spool and wire spools. And then you can also have a stiff shrink. It always has to be straight, unlike a bundle, which can go along a bend through which you can route wires, right? Okay. And also additive manufacturing has a few enhancements too. And maybe all of these are in the help file that I'm going to show you some resources that might help overall. But really quickly, you no longer have to use a pattern. Before, the workaround was use pattern, but now they have the ability to do a multiple assemble in the tray, as you can see here, and you can control the quantity in here, and it it does the placement automatically for you compared to the pattern that you had to use in the earlier releases, right? There are some improvements to build direction optimization, wherein you're able to optimize it based on downskin area, support volume, shadow area, or model height, etc. It's very helpful, I think, for printability checking. And also, it used to be that it used to use a simplified representation when it created stochastic lattices that was introduced in Creo 6. Now they can use full geometry instead of simplified geometry. And also some of these formula-based algorithms, they've been improved now to better include, for material definition. So yeah, a lot of technology improvements, I should say. So depending on, it could be like a heat exchanger situation here where you may want to assign different materials to each complementary volume and to the lattice itself. You're able to do that now, right? So it's pretty powerful there. And also finally, you have the lattice that can bring in order to create the lattice, the lattice can be adjusted based on an imported Creo simulation live results. So your stress results can help affect how those lattices are created. So in the high stress areas, and maybe the beams are going to be different. So that's pretty powerful, I think. So some exciting enhancements on there. And finally, just last couple of slides here on the model check. If you have configured model check, they got 2 new checks in here. They're again customer requests. You want to see if you have weak sketcher dimensions, or you don't want your users to be saving their designs with weak sketcher dimensions. There is a check now for that, right? Under defaults, checks MCH, weak sketcher dimensions. And should it be yes or no, or should it be an error, or should it just be a warning and make it soft or hard check? Same with bodies, right? Now that they've introduced bodies in Creo 7, there was a check for if there's a body or not, but now there's an interference in the bodies, you can have it warn you, right, in the model checks. And finally, the multi-monitor display. So we all these days use 2 or even 3 monitors, some of us. So when you use multiple monitors, you have these config options that allows you to customize and pretty much say, tell Creo that my primary monitor is going to be this. What is going to be the DPI scale, the text height factor, etc. That will help you use Creo much more efficiently when you work in dual monitors or multiple monitors there. So I know I went through a lot of information in a short amount of time in here, but obviously, if you already have Creo 8, or if you go to the Creo's help pages, you have a what's new document that has a lot more in-depth information and a lot more info than what I just touched on. A few things that I thought was useful on the core side when I was playing with it. That's kind of what I've highlighted here, but you could always go to what's new, and that'll have the entire information. And like I said, the help file has, it's a lot better than it used to be in the back in the days. Each one of these options, many of the examples I showed you are kind of the videos they show in these help files pretty much. So you could go and review the YouTube videos, right? Many of these have, they have sections here. So maybe you're looking at assembly design, maybe you're looking at some fundamentals in there, or part modeling. Depending on your licensing, all of this may not apply to you, but it's very useful, I think. And some of the other resources I would recommend, encourage you to go and look at is in the PTC knowledge base. I would definitely look at the checklist for updating to Creo 8, the hardware notes, if there's any, is your hardware currently supported in 8.0, the README document, and even the most important one, the config.pro PDF that mainly goes over what's changed between Creo 7 and 8. Very helpful if you're an admin or even a super user, or even all users, right? You should be aware of what new configuration options have come. And only if you know all the config or the most common config options, you'll know Creo better, right? You should know how to just change the settings. That's very important, if they allow you to change it, of course. Okay, so this webinar that I've done will be recorded, and it'll be posted in our archives under webinar recordings or in our YouTube channel. So feel free to go through that. I know I went through a lot in quick time, but you can always go through that at your own pace. Let me see if there's any quick questions in here. Maybe I'll just see if there's a questions area in the GoToMeeting window or in the chat window. There should be questions. Let me see if there's any questions. We'll just give everybody a minute here. Let's see. There was one question. I came late to the session. Is it possible to have access to this recording? Yes, absolutely. I think all the registrants, all those who have registered for this webinar, you will be getting an automatic email with the link to the recording. If not, just if you go to TriStar's YouTube channel or tristar.com, if you go there, you should see these recordings maybe later today or tomorrow, or in a couple of days. It should be made available. Any other questions? Okay, so looks like we're already way past time here, 15 minutes over. Sorry about that, but there's a lot to cover there in short amount of time. But feel free to reach out to us or let us know with any questions, at tristar.com, or you can call us at 800-800-1714. Okay. All right. So thanks. I hope it was informative. You all have a great rest of the day and week until the next webinar. Thank you. Bye.